So what exactly is the future outlook of Bitcoin? We don't know. Nobody knows what the future holds. But what we can do is we can look at the on-chain metrics and we can go ahead and determine what is likely to happen based on what those on-chain metrics are saying. So if we first go to the young wizard, Will Clemente, he posted a chart yesterday, I believe it was, where he said 93% of Bitcoin supply has not moved in a month. Think about that. 93% of Bitcoin has not moved in a month. The strong hands are here to stay. I believe this is an all-time high. 93% of the total circulating supply of Bitcoin has not moved in 30 days. If you want to see an asset that is held by illiquid hands, by strong hands, by long-term holders, whatever you want to call them, diamond hands, and demand increases, the price has to go up because 93% of the circulating supply of Bitcoin is not moving in over a month. Now, on top of that, Dylan LeClaire over at Bitcoin Magazine, another on-chain analyst, he published two photos or charts or tables or whatever the hell you want to call these. The first is the Bitcoin supply held by long-term holders continues to break all-time highs. The way to think about this is as the price goes up, the long-term holders sell into the bull market. So as you can see here, between what is essentially October, November of 2019, the long-term holders continued to drive higher and higher. That's the orange going from the left of the chart all the way up to that peak there. We peaked somewhere around September or October of 2020. That's when the price really started to move. And so that price movement from somewhere in the 11,000, somewhere in like the 10, 11,000 range, all the way up to 60,000, we went from very high percentage of long-term holders to a very low percentage of long-term holders. Why? The long-term holders were selling into the bull market. So where are we now? If you look, starting in May of 2021, a couple of months ago, we started to see a huge recovery in the percent of long-term holders. We are now at an all-time high. Never before have more people with long-term tendencies held Bitcoin. More Bitcoin is held by those long-term holders than ever before. What does that mean? As you can see again in the past, just as early as 2019 or last year, as that number increases, it usually leads to a future significant price increase. The history is not an indicator of future performance, but we can use it. Usually history rhymes. And so to see 93% of Bitcoin not moving in a month and the percent of the Bitcoin supply held by long-term holders at an all-time high, it typically is quite bullish. Then if we move on and we look at the Bitcoin balance on exchanges, Dylan posted and said it continues to make new lows. What does that mean? Well, as you can see here, that gold line is falling aggressively. That means that people have gone onto an exchange, they've bought Bitcoin, and then they take the Bitcoin off the exchange. Why is that important? Because as you can see, as more and more Bitcoin comes off the exchanges, the price tends to work inversely. Bitcoin comes off exchanges, so the supply balance on exchanges drops, price goes up. Why? Because there's less Bitcoin on the exchange that can be sold. There's less sell pressure. There's more holding of the asset. And so whether we are looking at those HODL waves with 93% of Bitcoin supply haven't moved in a month, whether it is the supply of Bitcoin held by long-term holders at an all-time high, or we are looking at the balance exchanges making new lows, every single data point when you look at the supply of Bitcoin continues to tell a story of a potential Bitcoin supply shock. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. There's obviously risk. You should do your own research. But it does mean that if the on-chain metrics are confirmed with future price movements, that would likely lead to a very significant price increase. And so this is the beauty of the Bitcoin network, is we get to see all of this information. In the stock market, it would be very hard to pull this on a consistent basis. You can look at the quarterly filings, you can see who's buying or who's selling that's publicly traded, but you couldn't see all of the entities. Here, not only can you see all of the entities and where the Bitcoin is going on the Bitcoin blockchain in a transparent ledger, but you also get near real-time access to that information. You don't just get it quarterly, you get it on a very consistent basis. And so we can see things like day-to-day movements of the supply, whether that's on exchanges, in short-term holders' hands, or long-term holders. And so to me, this is part of the beauty of this asset, is that we get to understand who's doing what with Bitcoin. And overwhelmingly, every data point is telling us people are going onto exchanges. They're buying Bitcoin. They're taking it off the exchanges and they are holding it in long-term hands. And they are not bringing it back to exchanges. 93% of Bitcoin supply hasn't moved in a month. I like where I think we are headed.
Supply squeeze incoming.
we should get like a horn or something or like an alarm so that when it happens, we just say like, told you, like supply squeeze, and we could just hit it so that everyone knows, told you so. What do you think, John?
Yeah, long-term holders are extremely important to kind of to add validity to the store value. Can we bring back up that chart about the long-term holders, the supply held by long-term holders? Yeah, that one. So I'm curious what you guys think about this. Like, it seems when the supply that was actually held by long-term holders was significantly down, that's when the price was the highest it was. Is that because a bunch of retail traders, or was there a lag in the price, and that's why once that went back down?
It's because everyone's selling into it. So the way that the long-term holders and kind of the whales, folks who've been around a long time, essentially what will happen is there's a bunch of accumulation. Remember back in June, July, for those that have watched the show or listened to the podcast, we talked a lot about accumulation phase. And so what was happening was, you can look on this chart here. So again, go back to like late 2019, October, November. You can see with the price movement, it basically was sideways all the way until September, October of 2020. So from late 2019 for a year till 2020, price just went sideways. And so what was happening was, you can see in orange, there was just pure accumulation. The long-term holders kept buying up more and more Bitcoin. Also, the long-term holder kind of benchmark is usually 155 days. That's what they determine. If you've only held the Bitcoin for less than 155 days, you're considered a short-term holder. Once you cross 155, usually that's determined long-term holder. And so in that time period, there's some new people who came in and bought Bitcoin. They were a short-term holder, but eventually 155 days expires and they become long-term holders. So whether you were already a long-term holder buying new Bitcoin, or you were new and then you kind of cross over into the long-term holder box, you can see there's pure accumulation. That thing is just going up, 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 up. As more and more demand came in September, October, November, then we saw that price explode upwards. And so when that price goes up, there's profit taking. So what did people do? You can see all those long-term holders start selling into the bull market. And so the way that you can usually tell that you're at or near a top in the price is to look and see, well, how much of the long-term holders have sold? There's no way that we're at a top, right, kind of in air quotes, of price, because we're at an all-time high of long-term holders. Every single cycle we've ever seen with this asset, long-term holders are selling into the bull market. They're not accumulating Bitcoin in the tops of the bull market. And so that dip in the orange there is showing the long-term holders at the highest prices, they basically sold everything at those high prices. Then they started to buy it back as that price kind of started fell down and went sideways there around 30,000, 35,000. And so now all of a sudden we've come roaring back. Long-term holders are holding all this Bitcoin. We're at an all-time high. What that likely is going to see again is, at some point we'll get a massive move upwards in price. And then you'll see the same thing as the long-term holders will sell into in a profitable manner into the market. And we'll see kind of a dip in long-term holders. They'll reaccumulate and we'll play the game over and over and over again. But this is how markets work. And it just so happens when you have a finite asset, it's super clear because there's so much in circulation. There's no way, it's not like a corporation where they could come in and they could issue more stock or they could do things to change the supply. The supply is fixed. We know with 100% certainty what the supply currently is, and we know what the incoming daily supply is. And so if, in a supply-demand equation, if supply is certain and known, then you only have to extrapolate out what the demand is. And we can see that demand continues to increase. And so if you just continue to extrapolate this out, you can quickly see, hey, price is likely not to be at $45,000 at the end of the year.
Yeah, look, the nature of the constrained and programmatic schedule of supply within Bitcoin is beautiful, because you can do things like this where you can look at just the demand side and you can see that we're nowhere near the top of this bull run yet because of these metrics, right? These on-chain metrics showing us where the long-term holders are and where they're seeing that value. So, I mean, we don't give financial advice on the show, but I'm gonna put my seatbelt on.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're gonna do. What's up, guys? Bang, bang. Thanks so much for watching the Best Business Show today. If we're gonna be the best business show, we obviously need the best partner. That's why the exclusive sponsor of the Best Business Show is SoFi. They're an all-in-one platform that allows you to invest in all kinds of different assets, including stocks, ETFs, crypto, IPOs, and they even have an automated investing function, if that's your thing. So before we start getting after it again, make sure that you go download SoFi, you get an invest account, and when you make your first crypto trade, regardless of what you buy, they'll give you $10 in Bitcoin for free. It's that simple. Head on over to SoFi.com/pomp to get started today. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope that you come back and watch more of the Best Business Show tomorrow.